In this session, you will learn up-to-date information on the best way to source your products from 5 countries, US, Vietnam, India, Mexico, and today in this session, we'll be talking about that with Gary Huang. He runs 80/20 sourcing. And before we move to the content, I wanted to mention 3 sponsors which are supporting our event, which is actually, this session is part of the Sellers Fest online summit, and Carbon 6 is supporting this event. And Carbon 6 is a suite of tools that makes it simple to optimize and streamline every aspect of Amazon business. The next company which is supporting this event is Quartile, and it is an artificial intelligence powered advertising optimization platform that helps sellers and brand owners to maximize their potential in e-commerce platforms. And last but not least, Getida is also part of this event, and they are Amazon FBA auditing company. They help to get money back from Amazon through FBA reimbursements. So you can check the link to all 3 sponsors below in the description. And during this session, if you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe below this video. And let me introduce our guest, Gary Huang. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Augustus. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
It's great to be here.
So many people know you through Seven-Figure Seller Summit. Could you please introduce shortly yourself and tell us what you do in Amazon space?
And Augustus mentioned we're going to cover 5 countries. I'm going to add one more bonus. So we're actually going to cover 6 different regions to source from. So we're going to go over China first, because China is like the grandfather, like sourcing destination. But we're also going to walk through the 5 new sourcing destinations that a lot of sellers are going to talk about, including India, Mexico, Vietnam, Europe, and USA. So you guys are getting action-packed session today. Very quickly, I'm from the US originally. I've been based in Asia since 2008. I was working in sourcing. I was a director of sourcing for a consulting firm for about 10 years. Over that time, based in Shanghai, China, I've literally helped clients source multi-million-dollar sourcing campaigns, visited hundreds of factories. I've spoken a lot about sourcing ever since I would say about 2015, 16. So we've been doing this for a very long time. But sourcing, as you guys know, is changing very quickly post-pandemic with all of the lockdowns. So I'm very excited to get into that. And for those of you guys that stay until the end, we have Q&A. And I prepared a very special bonus for you guys that we're going to offer even more free content for everybody watching to learn more about the whole Amazon sourcing algorithm. So super excited to be here today, Augustus.
Perfect. And I think we are ready to jump to your content. Let's share the slides.
Yes, let's dive right in. So as we talked about today, we're going to talk about the Amazon sourcing algorithm. So who's this for? If you're an Amazon seller, whether if you're an existing seller currently sourcing from China, or if you're just starting out, I'm really going to give you kind of like the algorithm, how to source, where to decide where to source from, right? Is China still right for you? Or are these new countries a good fit depending on your products? And also the pros and cons in each, as well as some of the typical types of products you can find in each country. So by the time you finish watching this, you're going to walk away with an idea of where I should source from, what I should do next. All right. And if you guys have any questions, I love to keep this interactive. I'm here, it's 5:30 right now in Japan. I woke up at 4:30 for Augustus and you guys. So I want to make sure this is valuable. So if you have any questions, make sure to drop this in the chat. And also, so I don't fall asleep if I don't get any interaction. All right, let's get into this. All right. So first things first. All right. So the game plan today, we're going to talk about how the sourcing whole world is changing post-pandemic. Even these big companies with, fancy supply chain experts like Apple, like Nike, and, we're seeing all of the supply chain, that everything's out of stock, right? We're really going to look at this from a high level. And then we're going to talk about why you should consider sourcing away from China. I mean, sourcing isn't a one-trick pony anymore. I mean, back in 2015, 16, when some people first started, I mean, China's like the only destination, but now there's a lot of other options out there, right? So you don't want to let these opportunities pass you by. To be successful in e-commerce, you really have to pivot quickly. So if you're able to find a new sourcing destination, you can differentiate your product, you can find products that your competitors can't find. You don't have to deal with Chinese copycats. We're gonna walk you through all of that. Then we're gonna break down sourcing strategies from Vietnam, India, Mexico, Europe, and USA, and also talk about what products can be sourced in which countries. If you guys, because we are live, you have any questions, shout outs, feel free to drop in the chat. Even if you want to say, just where your name and where you're joining us from, I'd be curious. All right. And Augustus, feel free to jump in if you have any questions throughout this presentation. I want to make sure this is as valuable as we can. All right. So to start things off, I surveyed a group of about 83 different sellers what country you're currently sourcing from. So about 63% of people are currently sourcing from China. However, you can see there are growing trends, I was very surprised, 14.5% of people are sourcing from the US. We're seeing more people sourcing from India. All right. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we're seeing right now. Even more interesting is where people want to source from. So the same group of 83 people, I asked, what countries are you most interested in sourcing from? And you can see here, Augustus, 38% are interested in sourcing from India. So India is one of the most, the fastest rising sourcing destinations. We're also seeing a lot of interest from USA, from a lot of the other countries as well. So you can see, I know that you guys are interested. That's why I created this presentation for you, okay, to walk you through these new sourcing destinations. All right. In addition, I want to share with you this survey done by Kima recently, how sourcing is changing. So previously, everyone considered China as the first and only place to source from and manufacture products for your Amazon FBA business or for your e-com business, right? But nowadays, with the uncertainties, post-pandemic COVID lockdowns continuing on and off in China, I mean, Shanghai finally reopened in June, but with their zero COVID tolerance policy by the government, you really don't know. I mean, literally, the people are getting tested every 3 days with like a PCR test, 100% of the people. If someone tests positive, we don't know if the factory is going to get locked down, if the whole city is going to get locked down. So that's kind of the uncertainty. It's almost like you're walking on thin ice. Like you don't know when the ice is going to crack, right? I'm not saying you should stop sourcing from China, but if you are, you have to kind of have like a backup plan, right? And you can see in this data in 2019, this survey was conducted based on US buyers and European buyers. Okay. China's percentage of sourcing, as you can see, dropped in 2019. It was 61%. But as of 2022 first quarter, it was only 47%. So, I mean, do the math. It's a 14% drop in less than 3 years, right? That's pretty significant. China's still the biggest player. No one country can replace China, but you're seeing the other countries coming up, right? India went from 6 to 10%, 4% gain in 3 years. And in this line, all others, this includes North America, USA, Mexico, Latin America, it grew from 11 to 20%. So to really help you guys stay on, the cutting edge, that's why I'm offering the sourcing algorithm, because we're going to walk through other different countries. So if you're able to stay ahead of the curve, as you can see, this is going to put you at advantage with your business. All right. Okay, so let's talk about China first. China is still the king of sourcing, right? It's the granddaddy, it's the biggest. They have the broadest product line, the deepest supply chain, the deepest raw materials. It's relatively easy with tools like Alibaba, as everybody knows. And we also had another great speaker at SellerFest, so I'm not going to dive deep into that. The supply chain is very developed, right? In terms of logistics, the trucking, everything is pretty, I mean, it's developed, but with the COVID uncertainties, that's the only thing. The raw materials are available. So if you're sourcing a textile product, clothing, the materials are going to be in China, like the fabrics are going to be in China, the packaging is going to be in China. So it's everything, it can be a one-stop shop, basically. So these are some of the main advantages. However, why some of you guys are asking, why should we source away from China, right? So there's a few risks, a few factors that you really have to be aware of. Number one risk, as we mentioned earlier, the COVID-related lockdowns and delays. Even now, even though the country is relatively open, we're not sure how things are going to turn, because China has a different policy compared to the rest of the world. Is the city going to get locked down? We've seen like Shenzhen was locked down, Shanghai was locked down, Beijing, there was risks. That's the uncertainty, right? Besides that, there's obviously the high shipping cost, the whole perfect storm in supply chain. We saw container prices skyrocket, pre-pandemic 2,000, during pandemic 20,000. Now it's about 9,000. So it's still at least 4 or 5 times higher than before. So the higher shipping cost, the rising lead times, it's taking longer to get deliveries out. rising delivery times. We've seen all of the log jams, the port congestion at the port of Long Beach, Los Angeles, when you're bringing containers. Previously it may take only 30 days from Shanghai to LA to get it into your warehouse. Now we're talking, it could be 3 months, it could be 90 days, it could be even longer. Right. So there's still a lot of congestion. The tariffs, right? We've already talked about the tariffs for several years now, that 25%, 35%, or even 50%, depending on your product line, they're still here. So, I mean, that's another cost of your goods sold. That's an additional expense. And one of the beauties of the other countries is they don't have the same China-US tariffs, right? So immediately you can cut that from your bottom line. The rising labor costs in China, right? China is not as cheap as it was 20 years ago. So there's other countries with cheaper labor costs, as well as the copycat sellers, right? Everyone knows about the quote unquote Chinese sellers. I don't like to stereotype people, but there's a lot of, the business culture in China, a lot of it is based on copycats, different code of conduct, different code of ethics. So you guys have to be aware of that. Okay. So these are some of the main things with sourcing, why you should source away from China. I wanted to share with you what the big players are doing, because I always like to learn from the big companies like Apple, right? So recently we saw a few weeks ago on the news, Apple is moving their iPad production away from China, right? They're moving it actually to Vietnam, right? So they're moving some of the iPad production from China to Vietnam because after the China lockdowns, right? They don't want to get hit with their factories shut down and not being able to deliver iPads when customers want them. Same as Amazon sellers. You don't want to be out of stock, right? So I always try to learn from the big players, right, to see what they're doing. Obviously, we don't have like the same sophisticated supply chain experts on our team, but we can learn a little bit from their strategy, which I call the China plus X strategy. So today we're going to talk about that, the China plus X strategy. You can see Apple did not completely exit China, right? They're still doing the bulk of their manufacturing from China because it cannot be replaced, but some of their products can be moved to other countries and to enjoy some of these benefits. All right. So let's walk into this. And Augustus, feel free to jump in anytime if you have any questions. I wanted to first walk you guys through India. India is the rising star in the sourcing world. As you saw from the data, they're gaining tremendous amounts of demand into India for their manufacturing, for their sourcing. In a recent study, we learned there was 40% growth in exports year to year from last year to 2022 in the export volume, which is huge. Okay, obviously it's still not as big as China. I mean, we saw the graphic earlier, about 49% of people are sourcing from China in 2022, only about 10 or 11%. Okay, but it is growing very quickly. What can you source from India? I think the biggest differentiating factor for India is it can make handmade and more unique products. All right. India doesn't have all of the same equipment, the fancy production lines, the automation, the robots that you see in China, but they do have a very willing and able labor force. They also have about 1.3 billion people in India, and the labor is a lot cheaper over there. So they're really able to do more handmade type unique products, which we'll talk about in a minute. The language, there isn't the same language barrier. That's another benefit of India because English speakers are there. All right. So the official language all over India is English, even though there's different regional dialects. Most everyone knows some degrees of English. Okay. So that's going to be a little easier for you guys. Culture-wise, it's different, right? The culture is different from China. So don't expect to do the exact same thing as China. It's going to take a little bit longer, especially for your first order. The development lead time is going to be a little longer. The contacting suppliers, the responses are going to be a little bit longer. So you really have to decide whether it's worth the wait. But I think the key thing to help you guys as Amazon sellers is India is one of the best ways you can differentiate your brand. So it's not simply another Me Too product you got off Alibaba, right? You can do a lot more customization, differentiation, and we're going to, let's walk through a couple of these products. Augustus, if you want to bring up the next slide. So you're probably wondering what products can you source from India, right? I would say the top thing is eco-friendly products, right? Products made of cork, made of cactus, made of pineapple fibers, because they really have a wealth of natural materials out there. And especially this is in line with the trend we're seeing right now. The whole world is going more eco-friendly. We're doing like terrible things to the earth. We want to turn that around. And this can be additional marketing, differentiating factor for your brand, right? To stand out. And your factories in India, they can work with you on this because they're, even in India today, like there's no plastic bags anywhere. If you go to the supermarket, they're not going to give you a plastic bag, right? So that kind of is like the mindset of India. They're really going towards eco-friendly. You also see you can see they're very strong in natural materials, right? Wooden products, leather products, textiles, also metal products, not necessarily like, fancy metal, like, the highest grade, like stainless steel 304 food grade, maybe not as much, but if it's like more simple metals, they can do that. Okay. And imagine like the workshop, it's more like handmade, type metals versus China, where everything is like machine made, like stamps, like molds. Okay. I hope that makes sense, guys. Any questions, feel free, drop it in the chat. India is also very strong in the home decor category, furniture, lighting fixtures, and also very much so handmade products, and much more, more than we have time to cover right now. But I wanted to give you the snapshot first, sourcing from India. All right.
And
so
I know you were participating in the India sourcing trip about 3 years ago, right? I saw you in the
Yes,
pictures.
thank you for bringing that up. So one of the best ways to learn to source from any country is to get on the ground in that country. So 3 years ago, I did participate in India sourcing trip, and that is a really great way for you to, fast track your whole sourcing. And then their India sourcing trip run by Meghala Bhardwaj and Mark Jolly. Meghala is based in India now, so they're running an India sourcing trip in October this year. So literally, it's an 8-day trip. There's the Delhi fair, there's a trade show there happening at the same time, and then there's also a factory visit, and there's a e-commerce conference and networking event at the same time. So that's an excellent way to really understand the culture, meet with suppliers. Going to a trade show, it's kind of like for China, Canton Fair, right? If any, many of you guys have been to Canton Fair, getting hands-on with the products, touching and feeling it, meeting your suppliers face to face, looking at them in the eye, right? Seeing if there's trust there or not. Right, that's one of the best ways. So if you guys are considering that, India sourcing trip is a great opportunity. It is an investment, guys. Right? I mean, 8-day trip. They're 8 days away from your business, from your family. But if you really want to, one up, highly recommend something like that. All right. Hope that helps. All right, let's keep going. So next, I wanted to walk through India. Next, Mexico, Pura Vida, right? The culture, it's, pure life. It's more laid back. It's not as, China is probably, the whole Alibaba, Jack Ma, there's this expression. I think, Augustus, you've heard of this, right? The 996 work culture, 996. Augustus, do you remember this?
Yeah, I learned from you, 996. So 9 hours. I remember there was like 6 days.
It's more. No, Augustus, come on. Okay. Obviously, you're not working the 996. Maybe maybe you are working. You and I, we are working 996. Okay, 996 is the work culture as described by Alibaba and Jack Ma. Jack Ma is probably the most famous entrepreneur in China. So his workers basically are expected to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. So Monday through Saturday. So imagine that. That's why China is busting their butts. And then that's why they're replying you in the middle of the night at any time, because that's their work culture. This is totally different in Mexico. Okay. Mexico is pura vida. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys heard about that, right? They're not going to reply you in late hours of night. They're probably not going to reply you on the weekends. Mexican, I'm not going to stereotype, well, everyone knows like the culture is different, right? So one of the key differences sourcing from Mexico is you kind of have to walk the manufacturers through this. You got to hold their hand. You almost have to educate them on what type of products are Amazon FBA quality. All right, they don't have the same experience as Chinese suppliers. Chinese suppliers, if you talk about like FNSKU barcodes, packaging, stuff like that, they've probably done it before. You don't need to explain to them. But Mexico is different, right? Mexico is like you have to hold their hand to cross the street a little bit. All right, so expect to have more time investment in terms of that. You need more preparation with the details. You have to have detailed specification sheets. You can't just like be like China, just send them a picture and it's like do this, right? You have to spend some more time on this, but there's definite advantages to Mexico. If you just look on the map, guys, right? If Mexico, if you're in the US, right, Mexico is just south of the border, right? It's the same continent, shipping is so much faster. It could be as few as 3 days to 7 days just to truck that across the border, right, from Mexico to the U.S. Compared to other, country sourcing overseas, right, sourcing from China or sourcing from Vietnam or India, right. You got to take the boat. It's going to take a lot longer time, right? So definitely factor that time and also the cost, right? The shipping is going to be a lot cheaper, just trucking it across the border versus paying $10,000 a container and whatnot, right? Okay, so that's one clear advantage. Another clear advantage is there's no tariffs. Okay, there's no China tariffs sourcing from Mexico. So even though the product cost may be higher, at the bottom line cost, you guys have to do the math because you're eliminating the tariff, right? It could be additional 25%. And there's also a free trade agreement, the NAFTA free trade agreement. So many products may be duty free. So not only are you cutting that 25% tariffs, you're also getting 0% duties. So every product is different, guys. So so you have to consider that, right? Think about the time savings, the shipping savings, also like the tariff savings. It's not just the product cost, right? Okay, so but I would say like the biggest difference is like the culture, right? The culture is more laid back. The culture change is slower. All right, so so those are some of the key things to keep in mind as you're going through this whole sourcing algorithm. All right, I wanted to share with you some products you can source from Mexico. Clothing and textiles are a very strong product category. Toys, I know a lot of you guys are selling toys. Their toys are doable in Mexico, and even if you check out like your local like toy store, right, take a look at the bottom of the box. Where is it made in, right? I mean, in the U.S., every product by law has to reveal their country of origin, right? Look at some types of toys, like when you go to Target or Walmart or whatnot, right? You can find out where they're sourcing from. Okay, paper goods, packaging, home decor, eco-friendly, fitness, pet products. I know a lot of you guys are in the pet category. Furniture, party favors, some health and medical, plastic injection products, even NASA, so like space suits. Some of them are made in Mexico as well. So they can do high quality as well, right? It's not just low quality products. Okay. So this is a snapshot of some of the products you can source from in Mexico. If you guys stay around until the end, we prepared special bonus to give you even more like a product checklist that you can find out if your product is sourceable in these types of countries. All right. Next, let's talk about Vietnam. Vietnam is in Southeast Asia. Okay, they've experienced tremendous demand ever since the whole trade war between U.S. and China. But I would say the key thing is Vietnam is for big players, right? Not necessarily if you're just starting out. We're talking like MOQs of one container. All right, because Vietnam, they're used to orders from big companies, like especially for shoes and footwear, big companies like Nike, right? Big companies like Under Armour, right? Also in terms of clothing, textiles, they're really used to like the big players, like the Gaps, like the Uniqlos, right? They don't, they can't do like a 500 unit MOQ the way that China can. Okay, I mean, it's just supply and demand, right? That's the main thing, because these big players are going to Vietnam. You saw Apple, they're shifting their iPad production into Vietnam. So they're more used to the big players. But if you're a 7-figure seller, you're doing, containers, a month, then you might want to consider Vietnam to kind of diversify away from China. Okay. It's a mistake to think it's the same as China. Culturally, it's a little bit different. In China, the people are very eager to please. They may say yes to everything. Vietnam, they're more direct, right? They're more blunt. In terms of finding these factories, it's a lot harder. Alibaba isn't as widely used. Okay, so you have to consider some other resources, and oftentimes it's going to be slower than China, right? The reason is, we talked about China has raw materials, right? Vietnam, if you're sourcing like, let's say, backpacks, some of the materials they may need to get from China. So they need to import those raw materials from China into their Vietnam factory, and then they cut and sew, and then they do all of the finishing, the assembly, the packaging, etc. Right. So you have to factor that into your lead times, because remember, no one country has the same breadth and depth of products and raw materials and supply chain as China. Okay. One of the benefits sourcing from Vietnam is there are free trade agreements with some countries in the world. So if you're like Augustus, if you're in Europe, or if you're in Australia, or even in Southeast Asia, they have this jargon, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian nations. There's free trade agreements, meaning zero tariffs, zero duties. Okay. So depending on where you guys are watching in the world, Vietnam may be a destination that you can consider. And I wanted to walk you through some of the products you can get from Vietnam. Furniture is big, clothing, textiles, footwear, shoes is huge. Plastic products they can do, rubber goods, wooden, metal, consumer goods, packaging, construction materials, and more. Okay. One quick tip for you guys. I know that one of my ways of finding products is I look at the competitors, right? So if I buy a toy, for my son who's 3 in the shop, I turn the box over. I see, where is it made? Is this made in China? A lot of times I'm surprised. They're not necessarily made in China. We're seeing a lot more stuff, being made in Mexico and other countries, right? That's another way you can find out where your products can be made, because you can follow the leader, right? I mean, that's it doesn't take a supply chain expert to do that, right? Follow the leader, guys. Look at what other people are doing. And if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to drop that in the chat. All right. Next, Europe. This is brand new. Okay. This, like literally almost nobody is talking about sourcing from Europe, but I wanted to share it with you. Based on some interviews that I've done, I've learned that sourcing from Europe is a growing trend, right? I would say it's slow but steady, right? Slow but steady. Think of the carrot. I'm sorry, the rabbit versus the tortoise, right? Augustus, this fable. You probably told this to your son, right? Like it's like a race, right? The rabbit versus the tortoise, right? Slow and steady wins the race, right? The rabbit sometimes they may they off to a quick start, but maybe they're kicking back, maybe they're locking down for COVID. But these other countries like Europe, they're slowly and steadily they're inching forward, right? So Europe's kind of like that, I would say. I mean, there's unique products. There's a brand story opportunity, and Europe isn't just one country, right? I mean, you guys know, and Augustus,
it's very important to mention, because, for example, US is so big, and you can like West and East, they can communicate very easily between each other. And let's say in Asia, we have this giant China, so everything is happening there. But in Europe, is just like 20, 30 dots, and they are all disconnected because they have different languages and culture, and they are not connected. So it's really difficult, can be difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. Exactly what Augustus said. They're different languages, they're different cultures, they're not connected, but there's different countries that can make different products, right? I mean, there's countries up and coming like Poland, there's countries like Turkey, and even Western Europe countries, they can make products as well. So I would say there's a unique product opportunity. There's good selection of products across multiple countries, but expect higher prices, right? Obviously, I mean, Europe is not China, right? Europe is not Vietnam, so you're going to be paying higher prices, but you're going to get lower shipping rates, right? So if you're selling in Europe, it's a lot cheaper and it's a lot faster than sourcing from Asia, right? Duty-free opportunities if you're shipping to EU. If you're in Europe, there's duty-free, trade agreements. And also in terms of raw materials, there may be some raw materials available as well. So we are seeing a trend in sourcing from Europe. I would say like the biggest thing is differentiation, because a lot of sellers, especially, the Chinese sellers or even American sellers, right? Everyone's sourcing from Asia. But if you can find a supplier maybe hidden in your network in Europe, that's going to be huge, right? You're going to have that product that nobody else is selling. But yeah, it's going to take a lot more time, a lot more emails, a lot more phone calls, and there's the whole vacation. Like I wish I had that vacation schedule that you guys have in Europe. That really long holiday, and it's different, right? So again, I think a lot of it goes back to the work culture. There's no 996 in Europe, as far as I know. Is that right, Augustus?
I think can be that Eastern European countries, they work more. In North Europe, like Scandinavia, I learned that like 5 p.m. and everybody goes home, even like a few minutes before 5 p.m. But in Eastern Europe, like it's they are now well-developed countries, but they are not so rich. So people are still maybe sometimes work two jobs or 1.5 to get more money to pay their mortgage and so on and so on.
Yeah. So, Europe, it's diverse, right? You have Western Europe culture, like Scandinavia, more, like almost like, Western culture, and you have like a lot of hardworking people as well, right, in these countries. So, but as a general rule, don't expect the same, quickness in terms of response times, in terms of manufacturing, etc. Okay, let's go to the products we can get. All right. So the products that you can source from Europe is textiles, especially clothing, home and garden type textile products, wooden products, furniture, toys, cosmetics, right? Supplements. I know a lot, supplements is huge. Cosmetics, that's a huge, huge industry. You can get that in Europe, paper packaging, and even more. I just don't have the time to go over the complete list. I would prepare some free resources at the end if you guys want to learn more. But I wanted to just touch upon this for you guys to get that first. Okay. I would say for Europe, you guys have to do a lot of groundwork, a lot of online research, emailing, picking up the phone, and visiting suppliers, and even trade shows. I mean, trade shows have reopened in Europe, so trade shows are a really great way to source suppliers for those of you guys that can travel. All right. So last but not least, I wanted to talk about the USA, the American dream, so to speak. Right, USA. The whole government really wants to bring manufacturing back, but I'm sorry to say that train has left maybe 50 years ago. US used to have a lot of manufacturing back in the glory days. Think about like Detroit, Motor City, but all of those factories have long shut down. They've been outsourced overseas, and it's very hard to bring all of that back, right? And then even in terms of the workforce, there's a lack of engineers. It's really hard to find the same type of talent. And even if you go to like American universities, if you look at a lot of the the graduate programs with like the engineering programs, they're all immigrants, right? You see very few Americans going into those type of programs. At least when I went to school, when I went to college, I don't want to date myself, but they were all Chinese, Indian, very few, right? So for the US, I mean, I don't mean to get political with you guys, but there was like the quote unquote brain drain. So a lot of these type of talented young people, trained in engineering and such, after they got their degree, they couldn't stay in the States. They had to go back. They left their country. So those other countries are enjoying like the fruits of the American, education system, right? So, it is what it is, right? So for the US, it's not going to be a one-stop shop. You can't just expect them to be like China, send them this product. Can you do it? And then they're going to map it out for you. They're not going to do that for you. US is not a one-stop shop. They don't have the same engineers. They don't have the same designers on staff. You're going to have to do that. Okay. So I would say that's the biggest difference. The other thing is the lack of products available in the US. It's very, very limited. Okay. We're going to talk about some products, but you're not going to find the same breadth and depth. I mean, the inflation in the US, the high, labor cost, minimum wage, different in every state, right? So it's going to be more, the labor is going to cost more. Okay. I would say those are some of the cons, and some of the benefits is number one, sourcing in your backyard, and you're in the US, right? Very short shipping times, sourcing domestically, you don't have to deal with the overseas containers, cheaper, significantly cheaper versus that. Even if it is, not cheap to ship domestically, it's going to be a lot cheaper than shipping from Asia, right? In terms of communication, there's no communication or language barriers, right? I mean, everyone's speaking English. I mean, some immigrant communities may be speaking other languages, but pretty much you can get by, right? There's no tariffs, there's no duties, right? So immediately you save 25% and more, right? And finally, I would say like the Made in USA, that badge, it carries some weight, right? That will differentiate your product, and you may be able to sell it for a higher price, right? Because nowadays with e-commerce being more and more competitive, we're seeing demand is dipping in e-commerce. That could be one way to differentiate yourself and command a higher price point to offset some of those those factors. All right. So let's talk about some products that you can get in the US. Okay. I would say apparel. This is the biggest thing. And some of you guys may know that my mom is a retired fashion designer based in LA. So for us growing up in Los Angeles, I was surrounded by the whole, the garment district in downtown LA. There's actually a network of small factories, dye houses, trim. You can buy that stuff locally in the US, especially in the apparel industry and the accessories, even jewelry. You can buy that stuff in the US. They may not be 100%, they're not 100% made in the US. A lot of the t-shirts, they're imported from Asia, but it's kind of like a blank canvas that you can design, you can differentiate, you can add value to. And then based on the laws in the U.S., if a certain amount of like the cost of making this shirt is done in the U.S., it can qualify as made in U.S. Okay. So that's one thing you can consider. Leather goods, home textiles, furniture products you can get in the US, medical, right? Medical is a big thing. Skincare, cosmetics, that's huge. A lot of people, do drop shipping, right? Cosmetics, supplements, some electronics, wearable devices, tools, and more. Okay, so these are the type of products that you can source in the USA. All right. So we covered a lot today, and I prepared this table. And actually, this is incomplete because Europe was a last minute add. I wanted to add even more value for you guys. So, but forgive me, I did not put Europe on this table. It should be in there. But as you can see, China is still the sourcing king, everything under the sun. But as we learned, we should follow the leader. Companies like Apple, they're doing China plus X sourcing strategy. So for your business, what is that X, right? Could it be India? It's the fast riser, eco-friendly products, handmade, unique. Could it be Mexico, right? I mean, more laid back culture, but they can make a lot of products there as well. It's a lot closer, it's a lot faster to ship, cheaper to ship, no duties. Could it be Vietnam if you're a bigger seller, right? Maybe you can get those orders in. We're talking about 1 container minimums, but they're strong in certain categories, footwear and a lot of the others that we've seen. And Europe, slow and steady, right? Slow and steady wins the race. It's very diverse. You have to consider different countries, but different countries may be able to make those type of products for you. USA, finally, it's not a one-stop shop. It's not going to be like China. Short shipping times, no language barriers, made in USA, but more limited product selection. All right. I wanted to share with you a sourcing summit that I did, that way I created. So we had 12 different sourcing experts from all over the world. So this presentation was kind of what I learned from these 6 different sourcing experts from 6 different countries, as well as we invited some real sellers, 8-figure sellers, 7-figure sellers sourcing from these different countries. We invited shipping experts as well to really give you the A to Z to sourcing right now, post-pandemic, with all these changes. So I like to offer you a free pass for this online event. This is additional online content. If you're into sourcing, I think there's nobody else who did this. That's why I created this. So it's a 2-day online event. You can get a free pass at the link right there. It's a 2-day event. And in addition, besides the trainings, the video trainings, we also have an expanded product checklist or even more product categories. So over 100. And then we also include a step-by-step negotiations guide that you can use to negotiate the best prices, payment terms, even more. An RFQ, request for quotation done for you template, so you can save time contacting suppliers, as well as a sourcing agent checklist. So previously on one of our previous trainings with SellerFest, someone asked a question about sourcing agents. I remember that was the #1 question, guys. So because of that, I created this for you guys, a sourcing agent checklist with the 11 questions you got to ask before you work with a sourcing agent and 3 red flags to avoid. You get all of that for free at that link that Agostas just shared, the 7-figure sourcing summit. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Agostas. Any questions? Anything else we should cover?
So let me check for some questions. And by the way, all the links you will find below in the description. Also the link to the 7-figure sourcing summit. And let me check. We do have some questions which I could ask. So let's do this one. How to better negotiate with China suppliers about lead times, considering what has been happening lately?
Yeah, I would say it depends on your relationship with the supplier. Do you have good trust? Do you have good guanxi? That's a Chinese expression, building better relationships to building better business. If you're one of their larger sellers, if you've been working with them over time, they may give you a better advantage when it comes to that lead time. If not, to be realistic, I would say you have to buffer in additional lead time. If they say 30 days, I would estimate 45 days, buffer in additional 50%, just to consider all of these risk factors. Work with your supplier, over communicate with them, definitely check in at least once a week, if not more, during your production line because of all these different factors. Chinese suppliers aren't the greatest communicators. I mean, it's part of the culture. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. They don't like to bring up problems as they arise. So it's up to you. You really have to be proactive when it comes to that. If you want to get even more negotiations tactics, I wrote a 30-page ebook about negotiating with suppliers in China. So definitely get that bonus from that URL that Augustus just shared a minute ago at the Sourcing Summit. You can get that 30-page guide. So there's a lot more information that you can learn from that.
Yes. About India, I believe you have some experience. How Indian manufacturers ensure the constant product quality for handmade products?
For handmade products, it's a little bit, it's not just like pressing a button and then spitting out the same thing, right? So similar to China, one of the things that I learned when I spoke with an Indian seller, he's one of the top sellers in Amazon India, 7-figure seller. He says the culture is you really have to stay on top of your order. You really have to communicate with your supplier over WeChat, really keep checking in on the order when you place it, right? Because if you don't do that, the Indian suppliers culturally, they think you don't care, right? If they think you don't care, they're just going to let things slide, right? So you really have to stay on top of it, because when you do that, the Indian supplier knows that you're very invested in this, and then you have to tell them about the quality, and of course, be very specific with the specifications, right? Send them that spec sheet with the drawings, with the measurements, with the tolerances, right? So if you're sourcing a t-shirt, like the length is like, let's say like 35 centimeters plus minus 2 centimeters, that's what you can accept, right? If it's +3, that's a no-no. If it's +1, that's okay, right? You have to draw the boundaries to them, okay? Be sure to over communicate. Indian culture is different in that respect. And then, I mean, I could go on for like 20 minutes about that, but I think that would be the top thing. And then if you want to learn more, we have the Sourcing Summit, where I had Megla and Mark give a 60-minute training about specifically sourcing from India. Indian culture is unique as well. We talked about 996 in China. There's this concept of Paka in India. It's a Hindi term. Like Paka is like when people say, "Oh, let's meet at 2:00," right? That could be 2:30. That could be 3:00 in Indian culture, right? You have to say 2:00 Paka. Like Paka means like for real, for sure. Because if they just say 2:00, there's like, okay, we'll do at 2:00. But if if I have another meeting that's really important, they expect me, okay, I'm gonna go over a little bit. I'm gonna be there at 2:30. That's okay. For Indian culture, it's different, right? So stuff like that. Paka. Check out the India session, and India Sourcing Trip is a really great resource. I learned that. I don't think there's no way you can learn that online.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let's talk about US. How much Amazon US customers pay attention to the country the products are manufactured in, and can it influence their purchase decision?
Yeah, I would turn this around. For those of you guys watching the US, do you care if it's made in the US? Would you pay more for a made in US product, right? I know that there's people watching the US right now, right? Why don't you comment below? I'm curious, right? I would say some people do, right? I mean, just to be real, my AirPod battery is running a little low, but just to be real, a lot of people dislike made in China, right? I mean, this is not politically correct, but we're not being PC. We're going to be real for e-commerce sellers. And Augustus, I think you know this. A lot of people dislike made in China, right? There's a whole trade war going on. And the fact that you made in US, people are proud of that, right? So some segments of the people, they like to see that, right? So if you're sourcing in the US, definitely put that up, front and center. In my prior family business, my mother's clothing line in the 90s, all of her stuff was made in the US, and she was able to sell at a higher price point than stuff made in China. But it's harder to compete in price, right? So you're not going to be the low price leader, right? You're not going, you can't fight a price war, but you can fight like a quality war, like a premium. The strategy will be completely different, right? I would say that. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Can you comment on different MOQs, minimum order quantities, in different countries?
Yeah. China, I mean, people are already familiar. I mean, definitely check out that session. They already went with China. I would say India, it really depends. I was very surprised when I went to India. Some of the manufacturers were willing to do MOQs as low as 25 to 50 pieces. Right? I was really shocked. There's no way that any Chinese supplier as far as I know, will do that. Because they're doing this handmade, right? They don't have like a whole like machinery equipment, and they're buying that. So it could be very low for India. But the thing is, you have to factor in shipping, right? It's probably not going to be worthwhile for you to ship just a 25, 50 unit order when the shipping price is going to cost like so much more than the actual product. Vietnam is high, as we talked about. It's for big players, only 1 container minimums. Europe, it's really diverse, right? I can't really generalize. I mean, it could be around China, depending on your product. USA, I don't. I mean, USA could be moderately lower as well. That is one, and Mexico. Mexico, you're not going to see really low MOQs, but the beauty of Mexico and US is they have the faster lead time, so you can place relatively smaller orders because they can come in more frequently. So if you're sourcing from China, you're placing an order for 3 months inventory or 6 months inventory. For US, for Mexico, you can place, if you can handle it, if you can place smaller orders and more shipments coming in, that would free up your cash flow, right? Because you have more rapid inventory turnover. So hope that helps.
Yes, let's see another question. Can someone check on Amazon from where the sellers are sourcing the products?
I love this question. I'll share you 2 quick tips. Right, number 1, you buy the product yourself, you get it delivered, you see yourself, right? It's going to say on the package, right? Follow the leader. Remember we talked about that just a few minutes ago. Number 2, if you guys use Jungle Scout, I don't know if Augustus, if you have a link for your link for Jungle Scout. Jungle Scout, the tool, has a supplier database feature where you can search based on an Amazon ASIN, based on a company brand name, where that is manufactured from, because the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, USCBP, they have records of all imports going into the country. It's not 100%. But you can find out where the product is being made from, and then you can also find out possibly the supplier as well, right? So that's a quick tip. I'm surprised not many people talk about that, but Jungle Scout has that feature, and that's probably one of the best ways to do it. It's not 100%, but it's one of the tools in the toolkit. We talked about this as well in the Sourcing Summit.
Yeah. All right. So if you are enjoying the content, everyone watching, please like and subscribe. We want to hit 12,000 subscribers in the next few days. Please subscribe. And I think that's it. That's good 50 minutes of content. And once again, I will activate the link which people can visit and join the 7-Figure Sourcing Summit. Gary, it's kind of a mini summit, very similar to what we're doing, but Gary specialized in this event talk only about sourcing.
Yes.
All right. And how else
Yeah. If I can just talk about sourcing.
Sure.
Sourcing may not be the sexiest topic, but the real professionals know the real money is made not just in the selling, but on the sourcing. Because if you can get it for a cheaper price, if you can get it a better quality, if you can find a product that your competitors can't find, you have that advantage from the start of the race, right? So not a lot of people talk about that. My background is in supply chain. I was like the chairperson of the American Chamber of Commerce Shanghai Supply Chain Committee. There were people sitting on that around the conference table from the top sourcing countries. So I really wanted to distill this knowledge for you guys, for the Amazon community, because I didn't see a lot of that out there, and sourcing is changing, right? I mean, it's not just a one-trick pony China anymore. So I just wanted to leave you guys with that, and I hope this helps, guys.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gary. You will find the links to Gary's pages below in the description. And I see Margin Business says, thank you. Great content, as always. All right. Cool. Thank you very much, Gary. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
And now I would like to invite you to watch other video with Kian Golzari. He goes over the most recent changes when you're sourcing products from China factories.